Hello and welcome to the CEO Show. I'm your host, Nick Vaidya. Our guest today is someone with immense experience in the business of persuasion. Jim Crimmins has served as the Chief Strategy Officer at the ad agency powerhouse, DDB, and has been the former Director of Worldwide Brand Planning. He's a well-recognized individual in the persuasion world and now has summed it all up with the release of his book, Seven Secrets of Persuasion, that translates the most recent neuroscience research insights into practical new techniques for effective persuasion in all areas of life. Considering how neuroscience is emerging as a power tool for thought and behavior modification, Crimmins' insights are timely and powerful. His insights and perspectives can be game-changing for anyone in leadership roles. So let's get on with it and hear what Jim has to say.
Jim, I'm really glad and delighted to have you on my show.
I'm delighted to be here.
Now, I wanted to tell you something. There's much in common between you and I, besides this conversation. For one thing, I'm working on a special issue on negotiations, talking with people like William Urai, Deepak Malhotra, some of the big names in negotiations, so this fits right in. But more importantly, I did my doctoral work in psychometrics. So I saw sociology and statistics, then I knew you probably did some psychometrics yourself.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. So the main thing that I wanted to get at is, I believe we humans have live in a lot of myth, misinformation, misdirection. We think we know, but we don't, oftentimes. Some of us who know the reality tend to perform better in life than those who buy into typically what's being promoted in the society, the social constructs. This is how things should be. The lion sleeps with the lamb in the Disney, that kind of stuff. So, and specifically, the reason I wanted to ask you this is because I deal with a lot of high-tech people, CEOs of technology companies, and there is this underlying belief. There's the branding side, and then the B2B that they need to be more factual, more conceptual, more cognitive, specifics. Whereas the brand side is, what we'll talk about it. And I believe personally that that's not quite right, because we are the same humans. If we can be influenced that way in one arena, we will be influenced the same way in the other. So that's where I wanted to begin with you to help me understand this dichotomy, which you probably define it differently as the lizard that you talk about.
Okay, I agree with you that the difference people see between decisions about brands and the decisions about business to business are not as different as they seem. That the most important decisions any of us will make in our life, we make in a very non-rational way. Our choice of spouse, our choice of job, our choice of city, all these things are not made on an objective, rational way. They are made, we decide what feels right for us. So if everyone we meet, we didn't evaluate on a spouse potential measure. We simply went along until we found the one person we thought we really couldn't live without. And we made that person our spouse. It was not a rational decision. People might ask us why. We could give reasons, but we probably wouldn't give the correct reasons.
And the truth is that there are probably 10,000 people who could be just as good spouses for a person. But we think, no, there's only one. And we like to believe that fantasy.
That is true.
So you're right. You're right. We don't make rational decisions. We pretend to make rational decisions. Rather, we rationalize after the fact.
Absolutely. After the fact rationalization is the specialty of the human species.
I have tons of examples of my own. Wrong decisions, some of the most critical decisions in life made incorrectly. It's almost like somebody else is doing it for me rather than me. And I like that song. I think it was Pink Floyd. There's somebody in my head, but it's not me. So talk to me about a little bit about the lizard brain. What do you mean by that?
first, let me give you another song lyric. This one comes from, I think, Rodgers and Hammerstein. It's, I can't remember the whole thing, but it's, fools give you reasons, wise men never try. Nobody can really explain what they do, why they do it accurately. They think they do, and they rationalize it. The lizard inside is that the non-conscious part of our brain that is by far the largest part of our brain. Maybe more than 99% of our brain is not available to our consciousness. Every time we look out the window, everything arranges itself into a 3D pattern. We have no idea how we do it. It just happens. It is all part of the non-conscious mind. David Eagleman said that the consciousness is like a stowaway on a giant steamship, claiming to be in charge and giving no credit to all the massive engineering underfoot. And it's very much like that. Our consciousness is like a stowaway on the steamship of our being, of our mind.
That's very wonderful. Lately, I've been into, I mean, this is a sidetrack. I've gotten a lot into meditation and yoga and pranayama, and reading a lot about the Buddhist literature and also Vedic literature, where if you have, most people don't know about Vedic literature, but the recent discoveries in neurosciences actually have been talked about 5,000 years ago in the Vedic literature, where fundamentally it's the origin of, I don't want to get into the religion side of things, but it's the oldest scriptures or knowledge, so to speak. And they talk about how you can completely change your brain structures and how the subconscious is the biggest, and how you, through meditation, experience the subconscious. You cannot describe it. You cannot learn it cognitively. It's the way it is. And it's very powerful stuff.
It is, and it reminds me, though, in a very different Western vein, the ancient Greek rhetoricians had a much better idea of how to persuade people often through all the different ways of saying the same message. They realized that a message can be said very persuasively or completely unpersuasively, depending on how you put it. And how you put it is appealing to, it is effective if you appeal to the lizard inside, the non-conscious.
You know, I just realized something. We all have often engaged in what is called communication suicide by Marshall Rosenberg, I think, who talks about nonviolent communication. And I have practiced it with my daughter because they're the best cases to practice and learn negotiation and persuasion. Same message, same thing. You say it one way and it is explosive, and you twist it around and say it another way. And it's just amazing how easy it is to get your message through and understood and get an agreement. And I don't want to get into how Marshall Rosenberg talks about it, but I did that 4-step process. Same thing. 1 week later, it works like a charm, and I've used it. So basically, it is all about me, the ego, right? And so when you say something like, I'm not judging you, I'm not questioning you, I hold you in the highest regard, but this is how I feel, the other person is more accepting. So are there such things in your model when you talk about persuading people? The fundamental, of course, is about understanding the other individual and what their needs and feelings are, and be able to placate them, so to speak. But are there other methodologies?
There are, yes, there are. If I may veer a little into negotiation here, there's a lot of advice available on how to be successful in negotiation. But it assumes that the process is linear, rational, objective. But a negotiation isn't linear, rational, and objective. There's no way to accurately compare a concession on point A by one party with a concession on point B by another party. There simply can't be mathematically equated. The participants arrive in an agreement in a negotiation when it feels right. And the job of the negotiator is to make it feel right to the counterpart while making the fewest concessions. And the belief or the techniques one uses to persuade someone to do most anything can be in some ways put to use, made benefit of in the process of negotiation and making it feel right to your counterpart to agree.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's not rational. It's not like you are just sitting across the table and bargaining. It's not credit card A versus credit card B. It's much more complex. In fact, you don't even know what the other person wants half the time.
Exactly. In fact, the interesting thing is the other person doesn't even know what they want.
Yes, absolutely.
But they don't. It is possible to figure out what is most important to them, but you probably won't find out if you ask them.
Yes.
All the advice on negotiation talks about understanding what's most important to your counterpart, but your counterpart himself or herself probably doesn't understand what's most important. You can figure it out by unearthing what is most important, by looking at all their past settlements, negotiations they have done, look at the pattern and see what did they hold out for? What was it that was most important to them in this settlement? And when you uncover what is most important to your counterpart in a negotiation, you will know something that your counterpart themselves won't know, and it will be to your advantage.
No, absolutely. In fact, you use the word unearth, and I think you've obviously talked a great deal about using that specific word unearth, because it means a lot if you think deeply about it. When I read about your book and about you, and I was reading the word unearth, I said, that's very potent. It's powerful, because it's not about finding out. It's not about discovery. It says the onus is on you to unearth from the other party if you want to persuade that person.
Yes, it exists, and you can discover in analyzing their behavior what is really important to them. If you ask them what is important to them, they will rationalize, as you said, they will make up a reason that seems to make the most sense, and they'll believe it's true. But it's not really how they make that decision.
No, not at all. And it's amazing when you are aware of this. Like lately I've been reading, so I've become more aware, and I'm experiencing things differently. I'm seeing the same person differently, just because I'm aware, and I'm trying to make an effort to see, well, what exactly is underneath. You gotta hear the unsaid and see the unseen. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you will not be able to do this, right? Because even if they're aware, sometimes they hide. But more importantly, most of the people are actually not most. All of us are unaware until and unless we make an active choice to become aware.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's hard to become aware, even if you want to understand your own motives. It's sometimes difficult. It's actually often easier for others to understand your motives than it is for you yourself. You're a little too close, and you assume certain things which may not be going on. We're very good at convincing ourselves that we have one reason for doing things, the most rational reason for doing things, when in fact it may be something else altogether.
Yeah, because you're right. We're so close to the data that you don't connect the dots and you don't see the data at all. Mm-hmm. Whereas somebody else is ignoring all noise and just looking at those points and says, you made these 5 choices consistently. There's a trend in your behavior. And so, no, I don't do that. I don't do this. I don't like this. I don't do that. Well, you do. Yeah. Look at your choices. Mm-hmm. And
there are some natural biases in the way everyone thinks and makes decisions that can be used as tools in negotiations. For example, everybody, I'm sure as you're familiar, has an enormous bias toward the immediate as opposed to the delayed. And in a negotiation, you can take advantage of that. A concession that your counterpart will feel immediately will feel bigger, even though it may not be bigger, because it's immediate. A concession that is delayed, that your counterpart won't feel for a day, a week, or a month, or a year, will feel smaller even if it is bigger. So if you were, for example, negotiating a settlement in a lawsuit and you were the plaintiff, you would want to request a settlement that is delayed because it will feel bigger, it will be bigger, but it will feel smaller to your counterpart. If you're the defendant, you want to offer a settlement that is immediate, because then a smaller settlement will feel bigger to the plaintiff. So there's these natural biases that can be tapped into and used in negotiations.
Now, Jim, this is very, very interesting and important. We like to believe ourselves we are rational, right? We don't have biases. I don't fall for the 999 trap. I don't fall for the sale, immediate sale, and things like that. Like I have done, and all of us have done. You go into an auction house, and you say, "What the heck did I do?" You get sucked in, and you don't realize that that's exactly how the brain works.
And it happens to everybody, even the most experienced among us. It's been shown that doctors are as susceptible as laymen to the way information is provided in deciding between whether you should have which something that seems like it should be very rational, whether you should have surgery or chemotherapy in treatment of your cancer. Depending on how that information is presented, physicians and laymen will both change their answers. They all respond. So we're all, no matter how expert we may think we are vulnerable to these biases.
Yeah, and even though, and if we proactively think, we recognize that the biases are so strong that even when you come to know that you have a bias, it will pull you in. It's so such incredible smart people like Dick Fold of Lehman Brothers, and so many of these people, like the governor of South Carolina or North Carolina, whoever, people do incredibly irrational things, which is actually very nice to know, because when you are in your rational mode, because I can be very rational about you, I cannot be rational about me.
Absolutely true.
Right? So I can treat you with rational behavior by knowing, okay, I've got these levers, like you call them the natural biases, or trips. You can flip and say, okay, I'm going to get this person to agree to me by using this lever or this trip, and the natural biases will fall him or her into, I hate to use the word, my trap, or whatever you desire. Hopefully you are being, you're not being male volunteer.
You may be persuading them for their own good.
Yeah. And with kids, that is exactly what you do. You persuade them for their own good. So these biases that you're talking about, is there a list of such biases that anybody has ever compiled, or have you done it?
There are people like Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winning psychologist, has done a list of biases. My own list would be that three I would emphasize. One is the immediate over the delayed. Second is the certain over the probable. And the third is the emotional over the rational.
Okay.
Every case, the first of those is more powerful than the second.
Okay. And when you talk about Daniel Kahneman, you're talking about the person who got the Nobel Prize or something.
He got it was a Nobel Prize in economics, which was interesting because he's a psychologist. But
right.
And it was for his prospect theory, which is really biases in the way humans think.
Okay, that's excellent.
He has a book as well on heuristics and biases, which is...
That's interesting. That's very interesting. And Robert Cialdini, or I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, he's also listed 6 of those triggers that can be used, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So getting back to my original question, I know you work with large brands, huge corporations, and they got multi-billion-dollar budgets. But I have noticed personally, and that's why I wanted to get your insight into this, that when people try to sell in B2B situations, they're completely unaware, because most of them are technical people. They've been trained in a certain way. They're not aware of these psychological factors, or they don't believe in it because they think we are rational, intelligent people. And so they go and sell on features and functions, and completely ignoring the psychology of the sale. Do you have any recommendations for how they might do this? How something that seems so irrational, when you look at an ad, a lizard ad, so the Budweiser ad or whichever one, you say, this is ridiculous. I understand, but it influences us still. So what can these people do when they're selling services or
well, psychologists are fond and marketers are fond of talking about a process called laddering. And in laddering, you begin to your lowest level is those objective features. And then you begin to go up from there. And so because a product has this feature, what does that do for you? What's the advantage? What is it? And you keep bringing it up until you get to the point of how does it make you feel? How do you feel different because it has that feature? So it is almost always possible to ladder up from something that is very almost mundane and very practical and objective up to something that is much more emotional and motivating.
That's the process of unearthing that you're talking about.
Yes, it's very much like that process of unearthing. One time we're selling a very minor brand of cola, Shasta, and we were going up against Coca-Cola. And Shasta's advantage was it came in many flavors. Okay, many flavors is kind of uninteresting if you like Coca-Cola. So why do I want all those other flavors? But if you ladder it up, what might many flavors do for you? People could believe, especially young people, that monotony is not quite the same as many multiple flavors. It's variety. And variety laddered up to a more interesting beverage and a more interesting meat. So we ended up doing an ad being, I don't want that so-so soda, the same old cola. I want a rock and roll. I want a Shasta. So it takes a very practical, mundane benefit of variety of flavors and ladders it up to feel more interesting.
That's neat. That's very interesting. And because in the advertising industry, this has been the norm, but the technology industry still doesn't get it, excepting wizards like Steve Jobs and others. But most of the people who are selling services and solutions don't recognize this. They just get lost in features and functions.
Yeah, that's true. And actually, in technology, I've looked in the ladder in that a little bit. And what's interesting is that people who are most interested in buying technological products seem to be, this is across country around the world, seem to be interested in looking for a little more exhilaration in the life. And they find that exhilaration in technology. So the way to sell technology is to sell the fact that it is sort of like the gas pedal on a car. It is something that can give you exhilaration, a feeling of exhilaration. And so if you can equate your technological product with that feeling of exhilaration, you can sell an awful lot of other products.
Now, in case of, let's say I want to sell a CRM product to a senior executive in a large corporation, right? And their criteria for buying certainly would be whatever else they say, but you got to go deeper into it. It may be that he or she wants to get a promotion. or may want to show somebody else down in some way. I mean, you don't know what's going on in the office, right? So you're going there selling a CRM solution with all these features and functions, and he or she may not be interested in that at all, I mean, as long as within the ballpark, competitively. Then if you can address those needs, if you're not even aware most of the time, but if you could become aware and address those needs of the individual, you will obviously have a much better chance.
Yes.
And that's why,
if you can talk to, not necessarily the one person you're making the sale to, but other people like them, and ask them things, not really how they made the decision because they don't know, but ask them what they think of the people who chose A versus B. You can learn a lot about how they will feel themselves if they choose A versus B, because they will reveal that their other people's choice says something about them. And when they make a choice of your product or your competitor's product, they are saying something about themselves. And they may be, as you say, lining themselves up for a promotion. They may want to say that they are forward thinkers. They may want to be loved by their employees. There's all sorts of things they could want. And your job as a marketer is to associate your product with what that buyer wants to experience personally from their life. How can they get what they want by buying your product? There's something in your product that allows them to get exactly what they're looking for, and it's your job to marry those two together.
Now, is this something that obviously can be developed? As a person, you become more curious about people's emotions and feelings and people's worldview. And because once you train yourself to be that way with people in general, it's going to be possible for you to do that, because this unearthing is not something where you say, oh, you need to unearth, so let's go do that. No, it's a skill. You can
train yourself to look beyond the surface. You can train yourself to not assume that the way someone describes how they make a decision is actually true. In fact, if anything, you should assume the way they describe they make a decision is almost certainly false and will lead you in the wrong direction, because they would simply rationalize their decision. And well, another bias we have is any information, no matter how bad it is irresistible to us. So people follow bad information all the time, and it's very hard to resist that bias. And so if someone tells you why they're doing something, it will be very hard for you to ignore it. It takes some training to hold yourself back and say, maybe, but let's find out really how this person is making that decision by looking at the pattern of their decisions and getting at it indirectly, asking them, like I say, how they feel about people who do A versus B. Questions like that can be much more revealing of what's really going on in the decision-making process.
This is so interesting. This is so interesting because personally, I am one of those logical kind of a person. What I mean is, I am not very good at the other side, rather than being and so when you become aware and you say, well, I need to really train myself, you look back many of your life experiences and say, I mishandled this, I mishandled that because I wasn't even looking at the right information. I wasn't even talking about the right things, you know? And so because our society promotes these ideas about, especially in the current age and times, about knowledge and information and we ask questions and we get answers, you tend to believe the written or the spoken word. And you train that way, which is actually not quite right.
Yes, so, I would agree.
So I'm glad that you know, we had this conversation and you've written this book on the topic. I think we should be studying this in schools. So many problems in the future would be avoided if people could understand that simple fact that we're not rational people and we need to dig deeper. So Jim, thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Nick.